Hi guys, I'm Mark and I'm an Oyster Boy, and I'm here today to talk to you about upgrades to your brewing and to your brewing system and what order you should make those in to help you get the best bang for your buck and the smoothest progression through your brewing journey. Now, this isn't necessarily the order that I made my upgrades in and the changes that I did. However, I've now got 15 years plus of brewing experience, and I can look back on all that and go, well, actually, I wish I'd done this slightly differently. So at this point, if you're watching this video, I'm kind of assuming you're relatively new to brewing. Maybe you've got yourself a starter kit, which is mainly made of plastic buckets. You're doing extract kits in there. It might have been a Christmas gift. You've got a few brews under your belt. And now you're thinking, okay, well, what's the next steps? What can I do next? So let's get into it. Now for me, the first thing that I'd be looking at changing would be temperature control. Now a lot of people that you'll see online or people that you'll talk to might say, oh, stop changing out that kit yeast or using spray malt instead of sugar or adding some dry hop additions and things like that. And they're all great things to do. But the problem is, if you can't nail your temperature control, then the kits that you're making as is, you're going to struggle to make those as per their instructions, especially in the UK all year round. We have fairly cold winters, and we actually have quite nice summers at the moment. Maybe you might get one time of year when you can keep that kit in the 20 to 22 or 18 to 22 degree range that it might have in the instructions. But depending on where you're brewing, if you're in a garage and you haven't got any sort of heat belt, you're going to be too cold. If you're in the house and you haven't got any way to cool it down, you're going to be too warm. Yeast has a range that it will work in. And then you can sort of go, within that range to the outside boundaries of it and still get a great result. But if you start going outside of that range, you are going to stress out that yeast, and you're either going to have a very slow and lazy fermentation, which is going to leave you open to many, many more infection risks, or you're going to be fermenting it too high at the top end, and you're going to have a yeast that's throwing some really weird off flavors, which just are not going to make the beer taste very good. So before you start going and spending more money on extra yeast or different yeast, things that might be better, especially a dry yeast packet that doesn't come with the kit is going to cost you somewhere between £2.50 and £5, depending on which yeast you use. If you go for a liquid yeast, that may be anywhere between £12 and £15, and you want to be able to make sure that you can use that yeast in the way that it's intended to be used. So now we're going to talk about how you can achieve temperature control. Now there's lots of different ways that you can do that. Some of them are very cheap, some of them are not very cheap, but they will all work. And if I was doing it, and the way I still do it now, is that I have a fridge, which I usually get for free on Facebook Marketplace or, Gumtree or not buy sell, what's the other one? Free Cycle, stuff like that. Just look on there for fridges, under-counter fridges, larder fridges, whatever you can fit your fermenting bucket in. Take a look, and you will be surprised how many of these you will find. So get yourself a fridge. Get yourself an Inkbird. I'll put a link in the description down below for the one that I use, the Wi-Fi temperature controller. That's about £30. And get yourself a heating tube from Screwfix, if you can fit a heating tube in. If you can't fit a heating tube in, get either a heat mat or a heat belt. And what you'll end up doing is you'll build a temperature control unit, which is basically just the fridge is plugged into the Inkbird, the heating element is plugged into the Inkbird, and the temperature probe is taped to the side of the bucket, or if you've got a thermal well in your fermenter, it's dropped down into the thermal well. If you haven't taped to the side of the bucket, put something on the outside of it, so like either some putty or a sponge, so you're actually measuring the temperature of the beer and not the ambient temperature in the fridge. This is not a big investment, but it will absolutely wildly change your results, and it will then allow you to go out and buy those new yeasts and use them correctly, so you're not just wasting money. Okay, so step 2, now that you've got your temperature control under your belt and you know what you're doing, you've got your beer working through perfectly, and if you want to, you can ferment it at, within 1 degree of where you want it to be. That's the time I would say, start experimenting with ingredients. Start buying that different packet of yeast so you can see, with a kit you've already made, for example, what the difference is between using the silver packet yeast that comes with the beer kit, which the majority of the time, unless it specifically says in it, will be an ale yeast. And if, for example, it's a lager kit, you're not getting a true lager if you use an ale yeast. Now you can do the temperature control. You can go and buy a packet of, W3470 or S23, be about £4, but you can chuck that in and then you can ferment that beer at 13 degrees C. and it will be a much longer ferment, but it's what it's intended to be, and you will get a really nice crispy lager even from an extract kit, which you probably haven't been able to achieve with the ones that you've done previously. Or if you want to, you can go and buy a packet of Kvike and do it at 35 to 40 degrees. But what I'm saying is that now you've done the first bit, your second step is more useful. It also means that you'll be able to cold crash your beers. So when you're experimenting with your ingredient and you're dry hopping, you will be able to get all of that particulate matter to drop out to the bottom before you package your beer. Just be careful when you're cold crashing though, because you want to make sure that you're not sucking the liquid from your airlock into your beer. So just one thing to consider before you move to that cold crash option, just have a look into ways to avoid that. Step number 3 in my list of upgrades is the way that you package your beer. Now, if you've just started out, I'm going to guess that you are either using a pressure barrel or you are bottling your beer. That might be in glass bottles or plastic PET bottles. And I never really went down the pressure barrel route, but I did bottle my beer for a long time. And I remember it being an absolute arduous task. It takes a lot of time. It increases the risk of both oxidation and infection as well. Because you're having to mix sugar in somehow. Now you either could put that directly into your main bucket, you could transfer it into a second bucket with the sugar in there to sort of mix it in, again creating an oxidation and infection risk, and then again you're transferring it out of the bucket into the bottles and you're putting the caps on. So you know it's faffy and it increases risk. So I now pretty much exclusively keg my beer in either Cornelius kegs, or I've got a couple of old Sankey kegs knocking around, which I've liberated from outside a pub and changed the top on. Again, these, you can pick them up secondhand, but the secondhand market prices are very close to the price of buying it online from a retailer, where they may be reconditioned, but at least you'll get a warranty provided with that. So I'll put some links in the description down below of where I would pick up kegs from. And you're going to need a way to serve from these kegs. But as we said, you've already gone out and got a fridge. So what you can do is you can put a tap in the door of that fridge, and when you're not using it fermenting, you can use it for serving. So now you've got a nice chilled beer on tap. Go and pour yourself a pint from the utility room whenever you want. It's lush. Really, really good way of doing it. But kegging, it takes so little time compared to bottling a batch of beer to get that beer into the keg. And the results are, I think, a lot better. You've reduced your oxidation risk. You can dial in the gas pressure a lot more precisely with a keg than you can do with bottling as well. Actually, before I finish on the kegging, I almost forgot to mention the Oxybar kegs that you can get now, which are PET kegs, but they are very, very sort of cheap fractional pricing compared to Corny kegs. Also, they're a lot lighter for transportation, moving around, storage. So, you know, it's worth checking those out as well and seeing if they would work for you as an alternative to bottling, if that's the route that you're going to go down. Okay, so on to step 4 in my list of how I would upgrade. So you've got your temperature control sorted, you've done a bit of experimenting with ingredients, you've got yourself a kegging set up so you don't have to faff around with bottles anymore. Next step for me would be to look into pressure fermentation. So buckets are great, they're very cheap, you can stack them up easily and store them, they're easy to clean because you can get your whole arm inside. But again, when we talk about reducing risk, fermenting in a bucket does give a lot of the time a risk of oxidation because you can't do a closed transfer. If you want a dry hop, you're sort of taking the lid off and just chucking your hops in. The next step I would look into would be pressure fermenting. Now, this is just going to unlock a couple more things for you and add some more things to your arsenal, like the ability to be able to churn out a lager in a week or 2 weeks that's using a real lager yeast and is an actual lager, or a pseudo lager using something like Kvike or high voltage, which is going to be ready from start to finish to be able to drink it in, you know, less than a week, maybe 5 days. And that's achievable with extract kits as well as it is with all grain. Before you get into buying a pressure fermenter, take a look at a few things, such as the size of the opening on top. Is it going to be easy for you to clean, or are you going to have to buy some more equipment to do that? Are you going to be able to fit your arm inside it, is the sort of good rule of thumb for that one. Also consider what kind of beer styles you like to make. So Me, for example, I really like big, hoppy, hazy pale ales. So before I went and bought a pressure fermenter, I went online and researched the ways that you're able to get hops into them without adding oxygen into the beer. There's options available, I think, for the Kegland Firmzillas. You can go and you can buy a hop bong kit. If you are not getting an all-rounder and you're getting something like one of the Keg King Apollos, the snub nose, for example, doesn't let you do that sort of oxygen-free way of adding hops. It does have a port on the top you can unscrew and you can put the hops in through, but you know, you're still introducing risk there. Whereas if you get the full-size Apollo, which has the collection jar at the bottom, which you can use to sort of dump your yeast, with that you can sort of take the collection jar off, put your hops into the bottom, put it back on, purge that jar with CO2 fully, and then you can release the beer down into that, and that way you're able to add hops into your beer without the risk of introducing oxygen to it. And then when it's all done, you can then put it into a corny keg, which you've previously purged with CO2, and you can have a completely oxygen-free either closed loop transfer, or if you're a bit low down to let gravity help you out with that, then what you do is you just push the beer from the fermenter with CO2 and into the keg. And that way you know that you are going to be ended up drinking a beer that's been packaged so carefully that it's going to be glowing bright yellow rather than a dark grey muddy mess. Now unfortunately for me, the reason why I got into owning pressure capable fermenters, because you don't always have to use them for pressure fermenting, that's the other thing. The reason I got into these pressure capable fermenters is because I'd gone and got a kit, I think it was the Siren Soundwave kit from the malt miller, and I'd made that kit maybe 3 times before I caved and thought, oh god, I'm going to have to buy new equipment to actually get this right. And I think the kit was about £50+ each time maybe. And then I ended up going out and buying a fermenter that was 100 quid and the hop bong edition, which was another like 80. But now I can just churn out NEPAs and not have to worry about oxidation. I'm a big hazy boy. So yeah, if you're into big dry hopped beers, consider how are you going to add the hops. If you're not bothered about hops, really you can look at the more sort of enclosed, the easier ones to use, or the smaller ones that don't really have that hop addition port, and not have to worry about it too much. Now, next up, number 5 on the list. So you've already got your temperature control, you've had fun experimenting, you've started kegging, you've gone into pressure fermenting or pressure capable fermenting, and now you're thinking, what's next? Now, for me, it's all grain. And that's going to be the next step. Now, again, this definitely isn't the way that I did it. I think for me, the first thing I did after I did a few kits was I got into all grain, and fucked up a lot of all grain brews along the way because I didn't have the right equipment or wasn't paying the right attention to the temperature control stuff. But yeah, either way, by the by, my bad experiences. I would probably get into all grain a bit later in the game. Make sure you've got your cleanliness, sanitation, temperature control, packaging, everything like that's bob on before you go and start spending 5, 6, 7 hour days making beer to then let them fall over at another point further down the line. So all grain would be the next step for me. Now, before you go out and you buy an off-the-shelf system, again, there's always things to consider before you do it. So cost is going to be one. How much are you willing to spend? You can go out and you can buy a Grainfather GF30 for I think, or a G30, sorry, for I think maybe 600 and something pounds, or close to 700 pound maybe at the moment, not too sure because we bought ours a long time ago. Or you can make your own all grain setup from an old insulated cool box and repurpose beer kegs for the HLT and the kettle. But have a think about things like, what size of brew are you going to want to make? So my first all grain brewery, if I can find one, I'll put a picture of it on the screen, was a mishmash of things. So it was 2 50-litre beer kegs, which I took to a local fabricator, got him to cut the tops off and drill some holes in for me, and then I fitted some ball valves and made a false bottom from some mesh and put that down in the bottom. And then I bought a 100-litre pot from on the internet from Germany somewhere, and I ended up having this brewery that I could probably churn out 75-ish litre batches of beer with, which sounds great, doesn't it? 75 litres of beer in one day, perfect. And then after I used it quite a while, I sort of realised that I don't want 75 litres of the same beer, but I had to go through that process of using it for me to find that out. What I actually like is to have different beer, one after the other, and if I find one that I like, I can go back and make it again. But I got bored of it after, almost 4 corny kegs full of the same beer when I was living in a house where I only had one beer tap. So consider the quantity of beer that you want to make. Consider how involved in the process you want to be as well, and how much of that you want to have sort of like taken away from you. If you really want to be getting stuck in, go down the route of making it yourself, get a mash tun, or go on eBay. I did a video at some point last year where I managed to find a full 3-vessel all-grain setup with plastic buckets, insulated mash tun, cool box mash tun, plastic Burco boiler, and an old fridge with a temperature control unit at the bottom, and I paid £50 for the whole lot. So there's some really good bargains that you can find if you look for second-hand equipment. But if you want to be really involved, go online. There's loads of tutorials telling you how to make this stuff, and you can make a good all-grain setup. Even the chiller you can make from copper pipe that you wind around a keg and put together, and add hose attachments to each end and run it on gas if it's a metal one, or you put electric kettle elements in there. It's really fun, it's really exciting, it's really involved. But if I've been down that route, and then I became more lazy as I went further on, and now I use a grain father because I can put the recipe into an app which tells me how much water I need for my system. I put that much water in the night before, set it on a delay timer, wake up the next day, my water's heated up ready for me, and an alarm goes off on my phone every time I need to do something, and I just go and do it. So consider the output volume that you're looking for, consider the amount of involvement that you want in this system. Do you want to build it yourself, or do you want to buy it? And then if you do go down the buy it route, the grain father, it's a bit pricey, but it does a lot more than something that is just basically an electric kettle with a bag in it. So there's different ways that you can do it, but have a look at what it is you actually want to get out of it before you go and commit. And then finally, my last step after you've done all of those things is you dive into possibly one of the most complicated elements of brewing, but it's actually the main ingredient, which is water. I cannot profess to know all that there is, or much that there is to know about water and beer. But what I do know is that I've got a reverse osmosis filter in my utility room plugged in under the sink. And what I do is I use that to filter my water, so I've got a completely clean profile, and then I'll go on an app like Brewfather or Grainfather or Brewing Water or something like that, and I will say, okay, I'm making a Czech Pilsner, this is my ingredients, and it will pop up on the screen and it will say, okay, you need to add this many grams of this, 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 and this to your mash water, this many grams of this, 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 and this to your sparge water. And that will allow me to profile my water with a limited amount of knowledge of what it is I'm actually doing, but the results are fantastic. I've made the same beers now when I do profile water than I did before I started doing the water profiling, and they're miles better. But don't get me wrong, the ones that I was making before weren't bad, they just weren't as good as the ones that I'm making now. So I went down the RO filter route in my house. I think the one that I've got costs about 70 or 80 pounds, and I can do enough beer for a brew day in approximately, I'm going to say 4 hours using mine. However, if you go online and search for spotless water and you happen to live nearby to a spotless water centre, then you can go there, and it's basically like a petrol station, and you can get that much water for very little money in about a minute. Now, unfortunately for me, the nearest spotless water would probably be an hour's round trip, so then it becomes less economical and it's easier just to do it here. But it's definitely worth looking into. The results are good. The results are absolutely fantastic from playing with your water. But even though I do it, I don't fully understand it. Like I don't do I don't check the pH because I've not found a reason for me to do that yet. And then when you do check it and it's wrong, generally you're too late to fix it. You're actually doing the test for the next brew. However, my brews aren't bad, so I don't feel like I have to, but it probably is something I'll do moving forward. But yeah, water is the one thing that I would change after all of the other stuff that I've talked about. And then once you've done all that bit, you're probably about up to where I am. in my brewing journey. I'm sure there's still things for me to do. I just don't know what they are yet and haven't come up with what the next one I'm going to do is. But yeah, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you've enjoyed it. A lot of the stuff that I've talked about, there'll be links for in the description down below for the ones that I either use or would recommend or have used. And yeah, if you've got any questions, please drop a comment down below, smash like, hit subscribe, blah, blah, blah. And we'll see you on the next one. Oysters out.